And I can't tell you how many young parents tell me that their kids watch the show because there's very little innocence left on television.
America thought she was the perfect mom. For years, her family let us believe the lie. Now, they're breaking their silence about what Florence Henderson was really going through during Brady Bunch filming. The shocking marriage problems, the secret affair that left her with crabs, the truth about her relationship with Robert Reed that nobody knew until now. After all these years, her family is finally telling us what was happening when the cameras stopped rolling. Florence Henderson may have become America's favorite TV mom, but her real story began in a cold house with thin walls, no heat, and 10 kids crammed into one room. Born during the Great Depression in a tiny Indiana town, she was the youngest of 10. Winters were brutal. She and her siblings would huddle together in a single bed, rotating spots just to get a few hours of warmth in the middle. They weren't just poor, they were surviving one day at a time. That closeness, that bond, wasn't just about love, it was about staying alive. And long before she was Carol Brady, Florence knew what it meant to lean on family. Her mother gave her more than just lullabies. She handed her a lifeline. Florence learned to sing before she could read. By the time she was 12, she was performing in grocery stores for bags of flour and sugar. That's how her family ate. She didn't sing for fun. She sang because it meant food on the table. Her voice wasn't a dream, it was a job. And every note came from a place of grit and quiet desperation. Her father, already in his 70s when she was born, worked the tobacco fields as a sharecropper, giving most of the crop to someone else and keeping whatever was left. Some days, the only thing that made it home was a jar of moonshine. He drank. The family went without. But even then, Florence saw something to hold on to. His work ethic, his refusal to give up, even when everything else was falling apart. That mix of struggle and pride lit a fire in her that never went out. Florence didn't just smile because she was happy. She smiled because she had to. It became her armor. By the time she was 8, her optimism stood out like sunlight in a storm. People called her Florency, and she owned it. She learned early on to seek out good people, teachers, mentors, anyone who might help her climb out of the hole she was born into. That sunny attitude wasn't fake. It was strategy. It was survival. Everything started to change when she reached high school. During a school play, someone saw what her family had always known. This girl had something rare. Her best friend's parents stepped in and did something extraordinary. They paid for Florence to go to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York. She was 17, carrying nothing but a suitcase and her voice, but it was enough. New York was a shock to the system. Florence moved into a tiny room at the 3 Arts Club for women, surrounded by strangers chasing the same dream. She had no backup plan, but she didn't flinch. She auditioned, got rejected, kept showing up. Then came the moment that could have ruined everything. During a Broadway audition, her swimsuit tore wide open in front of the director. Anyone else might have run off stage. Florence cracked a joke and finished the scene. That moment of confidence, of laughing in the face of disaster, got her the part. That one role led to something much bigger. Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein spotted her on stage and saw what others had missed. She didn't have a big name or a big role, but they cast her as Laurie in the national tour of Oklahoma. It was her first major break. She was finally stepping into the spotlight. And then the phone rang. Her father had died the day before opening night. There was no understudy, no time, no way out. They told her the show must go on. And it did. She performed through her grief. And that moment stayed with her forever. Just months later, Florence found herself leading one of the decade's biggest Broadway shows. She was cast as Fanny, a role that would change her career. The show ran for more than 2 years, nearly 900 performances, 8 shows a week. No excuses, no breaks, just work. And she nailed it, night after night. It was the role that proved she wasn't just talented, she was unstoppable. She was only 22, on the rise, full of energy and ambition. Then came the news that she had a rare bone deformation in her inner ear. Doctors warned it could leave her completely deaf. For anyone, that would be life-changing. But for someone whose career depended on music, dialogue, and timing, it was crushing. Everything she had worked for, everything she dreamed of, was suddenly at risk. There was only one option: surgery. But in the 1950s, ear surgery wasn't what it is today. It was risky, uncertain, and terrifying. One wrong move could destroy her hearing permanently. Still, she went through with it. As if that wasn't enough, she got married that same month to Ira Bernstein. Imagine trying to recover from delicate surgery, fearing for your career, and stepping into married life all at once. It was chaos. But somehow, she made it through. The operation worked. Her hearing was saved. And after 5 long years, she returned to the stage, stronger, wiser, and ready to take on the sound of music as Maria. By 1959, Florence was ready for something new. She stepped into television as one of NBC's Today Girls on The Today Show. But even this wasn't as glamorous as it sounds. Back then, women weren't taken seriously on TV news. They were stuck talking about the weather or household tips, never the big stories. Florence knew that, but instead of complaining, she brought charm, grace, and professionalism to every segment. She played the role so well that she helped open doors for future icons like Barbara Walters. It may not have been her dream job, but it gave her screen presence and sharpened her confidence in front of the camera. That confidence came in handy in 1962 when NBC did something no one expected. They let Florence Henderson host The Tonight Show. At the time, it was unheard of for a woman to take over such a big role, especially in late-night TV. But Florence had already proven herself as a favorite guest. When Jack Paar stepped down and Johnny Carson hadn't started yet, NBC needed someone to keep the show alive. So they gave Florence a shot. And she nailed it. She stood alongside big names like Jerry Lewis and Art Linkletter, and held her own with grace and quick wit. It didn't just boost her reputation, it made history. She was the first woman to ever host the show. Before she became the Brady Bunch mom that America would love forever, Florence was already winning hearts through television commercials. Her partnership with Oldsmobile started in the late 50s, and by the time the 60s rolled around, she was a familiar face in homes across the country. She didn't just sell cars, she sang, smiled, and made people trust the products she promoted. One of her most famous performances was in a corporate musical for Oldsmobile, where she sang with energy and charm like she was on Broadway again. This early commercial success turned into a career safety net. After the Brady Bunch, she became one of the most sought-after celebrity endorsers in the country. Whether it was Wesson Oil or Tang, people believed her. She wasn't just a performer anymore, she was a brand. When Sherwood Schwartz began casting for a new sitcom about a blended family in 1969, Florence Henderson wasn't the first name on his list. In fact, he offered the role of Carol Brady to Shirley Jones, an already well-known actress and close friend of Henderson. They had competed for roles for years, but this time, Jones turned it down. She didn't want to play a housewife stuck in the kitchen, pulling pot roasts out of the oven every week. She wanted something more modern, more real. So she passed and took a different show instead, The Partridge Family, where she played a working mom. That one choice changed both their careers forever. Suddenly, Henderson, who had once lost the lead in Oklahoma, to Jones, got her shot, and she took it, but it wasn't as perfect as it looked. Behind the scenes, Henderson fought hard to make Carol Brady feel real. She pushed for Carol to get a job, to discipline the kids in a way that actually made sense. After all, Henderson herself had raised 4 kids while working through every pregnancy. To her, Carol seemed like a fantasy, especially with a full-time housekeeper like Alice doing all the chores. She warned the producers, people are going to hate her. But the network didn't budge. They wanted Carol to be sweet, calm, and flawless. When they asked Henderson to come back for reunion specials, she refused unless Carol got a job. Eventually, they gave in, but made her a real estate agent. Henderson didn't hide her disappointment. "Screw them," she said. "A real estate agent?" There was something else that always puzzled viewers. Everyone knew Mike Brady was a widower. His first wife was shown in a photo during the pilot. But Carol's past? Never mentioned. Not once. That wasn't an accident. It was a decision by the network. The show's creator, Sherwood Schwartz, originally wanted Carol to be divorced, which would have been bold for 1969. But ABC didn't like that idea. They thought divorce was too messy for family TV. So instead of changing her story, Schwartz just left it out completely. And for years, nobody knew whether Carol was divorced, widowed, or something else entirely. Florence Henderson joked about it often. "I killed my husband," she once said. "I was the original Black Widow." Years later, the mystery was used in a parody film, but it was never made part of the real Brady storyline. Still, Henderson had another battle, one that followed her everywhere. People couldn't separate her from Carol Brady. To them, she was always the calm, smiling mother with the perfect hair. But in real life, she was sharp, bold, and didn't hold back. Her agent once said, "They expected Miss Goody-Good-Shoes to tiptoe in. But if Florence didn't like something, she'd make it known." That shocked people. Even when rumors started about a romance between her and Barry Williams, the actor who played Greg Brady, she didn't shy away. She simply said, "I liked him too, but I wasn't exactly the Cher of the TV mom set." Later, after her divorce, she became a licensed hypnotherapist, something no one would have expected from Carol Brady. She also took on roles that went completely against the Brady image, playing a seductive woman in one film and an evil cartoon villain in another. During the 6 years she played Carol Brady, Florence was living in New York with her real-life husband and 4 children. But the show was filmed in Los Angeles, so every weekend she flew back across the country just to be with her family. Her kids would sometimes come to the set. They knew how to behave, and she wanted them close. Her son Joseph remembered, "She wanted us to be part of it all." Her co-star, Susan Olsen, who played Cindy, later said, "They had to share her so much." It wasn't easy, juggling 2 families and a career. But Henderson did it, and somehow her kids turned out just fine. Florence Henderson was more than just the smiling face of the Brady family. Behind the scenes, she became a lifeline for Robert Reed, the man who played her on-screen husband. From the outside, Reed seemed like the perfect TV dad. But inside, he was carrying a secret that weighed heavily. He was gay in an era when that could ruin a career. Florence knew, and instead of asking questions or creating distance, she simply became his safe space. She understood the fear he lived with, the pressure to keep it all hidden, and the anger it sometimes brought out, but she never judged him. She just stood by him quietly, helping him survive the spotlight without ever blowing his cover. When they filmed romantic scenes, things could get awkward. Reed wasn't comfortable, and directors didn't understand why. Florence did. She never exposed him. She'd just ask for a moment, take a breath, and handle it. She made him feel at ease, helped him through those scenes with kindness instead of pressure. It wasn't just acting, it was trust. She made him feel wanted on camera in a way that didn't make him feel ashamed off camera. That kind of empathy didn't exist much back then, especially in Hollywood. But she carried it with her, quietly and professionally, every time the cameras rolled. Their connection extended beyond those private moments. Reed often butted heads with the show's creator, Sherwood Schwartz. He hated how silly the scripts were and felt the show didn't respect real storytelling. Sometimes, his frustration nearly shut down the whole production. But Florence was always there to step in. She knew how to calm him, how to diffuse the tension without making things worse. She didn't try to fix him. She just made things easier. Her presence held the cast together. Even when things backstage were falling apart, that tension exploded in the final episode. The plot, about a hair tonic turning Greg's hair orange, was too much for Reed. He refused to be part of it, walked onto the set, and said no. And that was it. Florence stepped up once again, playing along with the excuse that Mike Brady was out of town. No one knew it would be their last episode. Reed missed the finale of the show that defined his career, and all because he couldn't stomach the script. Florence didn't complain. She just helped carry the scene, keeping things together like she always did. Years later, in 1992, Reed called her. He was dying. Colon lymphoma, made worse by HIV. He hadn't told many people about the diagnosis, not even the kids from the show. But he called Florence, not just to say goodbye, but to ask her to tell the others, the ones who had played his children, who had grown up with him, who had loved him. He couldn't do it himself, but he trusted her to handle it with care. And she did, because after everything they'd been through, after years of protecting him, she wasn't about to stop now. When Barry Williams was a teenager playing Greg Brady on the Brady Bunch, he developed a crush, not on a girl his age, but on Florence Henderson, the woman playing his TV mom. He was just 15. She was 36. But what made this story linger for decades wasn't just the age difference. It was the way Barry openly admitted his feelings, years later, in his book. He described it like most teenage infatuations: confusing, innocent, and a little embarrassing. He didn't want to sleep with her. He just wanted to be around her. And Florence, ever the professional, never laughed it off. She understood the situation for what it was: a teenager navigating emotions he didn't fully understand. Things took a strange turn when Barry decided to plan something special for Florence's birthday. He arranged an evening at the famous Ambassador Hotel. He couldn't drive, so his older brother dropped him off at Florence's hotel. From there, she drove them to the venue, where they listened to live music, talked about touring musicians, and enjoyed the night like two friends. Except one of them was still a kid. At the end of the evening, her respectful boundaries stayed firm. She made sure his brother picked him up and took him home. But it wasn't just a fan moment for Barry. He had gone all out. He'd made sure they had the best seats. He wanted to impress her, not like a boy chasing a woman, but like someone who deeply admired the person in front of him. Florence remembered it fondly. She saw how much effort he had put into the night, and rather than push him away or reject his gesture, she accepted it with grace. She understood that turning him down might have crushed him. That night wasn't about romance. It was about admiration, and it stayed that way. Still, Hollywood couldn't leave it alone. Years after the show ended, rumors started to swirl. Whispers that something had happened between the teen heartthrob and his much older co-star. The tabloids loved the angle. They didn't care that Henderson was married with kids. They didn't care that nothing inappropriate had ever happened. And they definitely didn't care about Barry's side of the story. What should have been remembered as a sweet, innocent evening kept getting dragged back into the spotlight as something scandalous. Henderson had to explain the truth again and again, trying to undo the damage that gossip had caused. The lies didn't just affect Florence. They bothered everyone close to the show. Susan Olsen, who played little Cindy Brady, was blunt about it. She said she hated those rumors. She'd been there. She'd seen how Florence treated Barry. There was no affair, no secret romance, just kindness and mutual respect. Florence wasn't encouraging anything. She was a mother, on screen and off. And Barry, all grown up, never denied his crush, but made it clear Florence was never anything but a mentor. When she passed away in 2016, he remembered her not just as a co-star, but as someone who shaped his life in a real way. Even on Dancing with the Stars in 2023, Barry took time to honor her memory, calling her the one who encouraged him to take risks and push forward. Florence Henderson was known to most people as the sweet, smiling face of Carol Brady from the Brady Bunch. But behind that cheerful image was a woman who had lived through loneliness, heartbreak, scandal, and reinvention. In her 2011 memoir, Florence dropped a bombshell. She had a one-night stand with then New York City Mayor John Lindsay back in the 1960s. They were both married at the time. She didn't try to justify it. She just admitted it. "I was lonely," she wrote. "I knew it wasn't the right thing to do. So, what did I do? I did it." What followed made it even more humiliating. The next morning, she woke up to find little black bugs crawling on her body. She had gotten crabs from the mayor of New York. It was a moment so outrageous, she couldn't help but find humor in it years later. She even joked that crabs didn't care about social status. For someone who seemed like the perfect mom on TV, Florence's real life had far more cracks than anyone saw. Her marriage to Ira Bernstein lasted nearly 30 years and brought 4 children into the world. But while she was flying coast to coast to keep her career alive and her family intact, the emotional distance kept growing. During the height of her fame on The Brady Bunch, she would fly from LA to New York every single weekend just to be with her family. Still, it wasn't enough. The loneliness ate at her, and her marriage collapsed in the early 80s. At the same time, Florence began slipping into a dark place. Her stage fright got worse. She became terrified of flying. Depression took over, and traditional therapy didn't help. Even with all her success, she felt like she was falling apart. It wasn't until she discovered hypnotherapy that something finally clicked. She enrolled in classes at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, where she not only learned to heal herself, but also met Dr. John Kappas. Their professional relationship soon turned into something deeper, and they fell in love. By 1987, they were married. For the next 15 years, they shared a bond that gave Florence the peace she had been searching for. When he died in 2002, she was 68, heartbroken, but stronger than she'd been before. Throughout her ups and downs, Florence never stopped working. One of the smartest moves of her career wasn't on a stage or a set, it was in a kitchen. Starting in 1974, she became the face of Wesson Oil, a gig that lasted over 2 decades. Her cheerful pitch for Wessonality made her a household name beyond her sitcom fame and earned her millions. But it wasn't just the money. It gave her staying power in an industry that usually forgets women over 40. That charm carried over to her cooking show, Country Kitchen, where she spent 9 years chatting with celebrities while whipping up Southern meals. Florence didn't rely on cue cards. She did her homework and made it feel like you were just hanging out with her. Her fans loved it. She later turned that same warmth into 2 cookbooks and even co-produced a PBS cooking show. Florence was always ahead of her time, even when it came to talk shows. She was the first woman to ever guest host The Tonight Show back in 1962. Decades later, she returned to the format with The Florence Henderson Show, which earned an Emmy nomination and gave older audiences the kind of thoughtful, honest conversations that were missing from mainstream TV. Florence Henderson didn't just play America's favorite mom, she was family to millions. And in her final years, she opened up like never before. Her one-woman show, All the Lives of Me, a musical journey, wasn't just a performance. It was a heartfelt confession told through stories, songs, and laughter. She didn't hide behind a script. She told it all straight, growing up poor in Kentucky, chasing dreams on Broadway, and becoming the iconic Carol Brady. With every note she sang from shows like Oklahoma and The Sound of Music, she reminded the audience that her voice, like her presence, still carried power. But it wasn't just about music, it was about moments. She made people laugh with bold stories, some a little cheeky, all of them personal. The crowd didn't feel like they were watching a star. They felt like they were sitting with an old friend. The show sold out at every stop, from New York to Hollywood, because people didn't just want to see Florence, they wanted to know her. That same deep connection is what made her recognition by the Smithsonian so powerful. In 2008, she was inducted into their first-ever permanent entertainment history exhibit. Florence wasn't just honored as Carol Brady. She was celebrated for everything: her Broadway roles, her music, her television milestones, and even for being the first woman to host The Tonight Show. At the ceremony, she donated her cherished People's Choice Award. For her, it wasn't just a trophy. It was proof that the people she entertained and inspired still cared, even decades later. That kind of love doesn't fade, and the Smithsonian knew it. They preserved her legacy so that even generations to come would understand how much she meant to American culture. Only days before she passed, Florence made one last appearance that perfectly summed her up. She was in the audience of Dancing with the Stars on November 21, 2016, cheering for Maureen McCormick, her on-screen daughter, Marcia Brady. They had stayed close for years, like real family. Florence looked full of life, glowing with pride, laughing, waving to the cameras. No one knew that 3 days later, on Thanksgiving, she would be gone. Just like that. No long illness, no signs. One day she was there. The next, she wasn't. It hit hard because she had always seemed ageless, always so full of energy. When fans heard she died of heart failure at 82, they were stunned. She had been on TV their whole lives. Even now, the Brady Bunch was still running, still bringing comfort, still carrying her warmth into living rooms around the world.